Hey there, and welcome to Brada Tales. Tonight, we bring you a chilling collection of horror stories set against the soothing sound of rain. Before we dive into suspense, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. If these stories send shivers down your spine, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Get comfortable, let the fear slowly take over, and tell us if you enjoy this kind of storytelling. Now sit back and relax, we're about to begin. Have you ever felt that something was watching you, even when you were alone? This question lingered in my mind as I entered the small cafe on the corner of Maple Street. It was a quaint little place, the kind where the smell of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the warm scent of baked goods. The soft hum of conversation wrapped around me like a comforting blanket, but something felt off. The air was thick with unspoken stories, as if the walls themselves held memories of the past. I had just moved to this town, seeking a fresh start after a painful breakup. My heart still ached, and my mind was a storm of thoughts and regrets. The cafe, with its cozy atmosphere, seemed like the perfect escape. I hoped to lose myself in a book and sip on a steaming cup of coffee. Yet as I settled into a corner table, a shiver ran down my spine. It felt as though I wasn't alone. The barista, a young woman with dark hair and tired eyes, glanced my way and offered a small smile. I ordered a cappuccino and pulled out a novel, trying to focus on the words. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I glanced around the cafe, noticing the patrons, each absorbed in their own world, yet somehow connected by an invisible thread of shared experience. As I took a sip of my coffee, a strange sound caught my attention. A soft whisper, like a breeze brushing past my ear. I turned, half expecting to see someone nearby, but there was only the clinking of cups and the murmur of voices. My heart raced. Was I imagining things? I shook my head, trying to dismiss the unease. Maybe it was just the result of my recent trauma. But then I heard it again, clearer this time. Help me. I froze, the words sending chills through my body. I glanced around, but everyone seemed oblivious. I wanted to believe it was my imagination, but the cafe felt different, heavier somehow. It was as if the very air was charged with a sense of urgency. Moments passed, and I found myself scanning the room, searching for the source of the voice. It felt familiar, like a haunting echo from a forgotten dream. The barista caught my eye again, her expression shifting slightly. Was it concern? I couldn't tell. Then I noticed a man sitting alone at a table across the room. He wore a dark coat, his face partially obscured by shadows. He seemed to be staring at me, his gaze intense and unsettling. I looked away quickly, my pulse quickening. I told myself it was nothing. Just a coincidence. But when I glanced back, he was still watching, and his lips moved silently as if trying to say something. I felt a knot form in my stomach. I was in a cafe surrounded by people, yet I felt utterly alone. The weight of the world pressed down on me, and the whispers seemed to grow louder. Help me. Excuse me, I called out to the barista, my voice shaky. Did you hear that? The whispers. She looked at me, her brow furrowing slightly. What whispers? I hesitated, unsure if I should share my experience. I thought I heard someone talking. Her expression softened, but there was a hint of something else, recognition perhaps. You're not the first to mention it, she said quietly. This cafe has a history. A history, I echoed, intrigued despite my unease. Yeah, some say it's haunted. Others say it's just the echoes of past patrons. You know how it is in small towns, people love their ghost stories. I laughed nervously, but her words sent another shiver down my spine. What kind of story? She glanced around as if to ensure no one was listening. There are rumors about a tragedy that happened here a long time ago. A woman disappeared and people say her spirit still lingers. Some even claim to hear her calling for help. Seriously, I asked, my heart pounding. Just a story, she said, but there was an edge to her voice. Still, it makes for an interesting atmosphere. I returned to my seat, my mind racing. It was just a tale, I told myself. Yet as I sipped my coffee, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to it. The atmosphere felt thick, charged with an energy I couldn't explain. The whispers continued, blending with the sounds of the cafe. I closed my eyes, focusing on the words that seemed to swirl around me. Help me. With each passing moment, I felt myself being pulled deeper into the mystery of this place. I needed to know more. Who was the woman? What had happened to her? As I pondered these questions, I noticed the man in the dark coat was gone. In his place was a small, weathered photograph lying on the table. My heart raced as I reached for it, feeling a magnetic pull. The cafe around me faded, the whispers growing louder, as if urging me to uncover the truth hidden within these walls. And so I found myself drawn into a story that was not just about the cafe, but about a past that refused to be forgotten. I knew I had to uncover the secrets that lay buried beneath the surface, even if it meant confronting my own fears along the way. As I picked up the photograph, a chill coursed through me. The edges were frayed and the colors had faded, but I could still make out a young woman standing in front of the cafe, her smile bright against the backdrop of the old brick building. Her eyes seemed to gaze right at me, full of life, yet there was something haunting about her expression. It felt as if she was trying to communicate something important. I turned the photo over, hoping for a name or a date, but the back was blank. I glanced around the cafe, suddenly aware of how still everything had become. The chatter of conversations had dulled to a distant hum, and the air felt heavy, as if the walls were closing in on me. I could still hear the whispers, urgent, plighting. Help me. What happened to you? I whispered under my breath, feeling the weight of the question pressing down on my chest. I couldn't shake the sensation that the cafe itself was alive, filled with echoes of its past. I imagined the young woman's laughter mingling with the sound of clinking cups, her joy trapped within these walls. The barista approached my table, her face a mixture of concern and curiosity. You found something, didn't you? I hesitated, then nodded, showing her the photograph. Do you know who she is? Her expression shifted, and I could see the shadow of recognition flicker in her eyes. That's Emily, she said quietly. She was a regular here before. Before what? I pressed, my heart racing. I needed to know more. The barista sighed, glancing around as if the very walls might be listening. She disappeared about 10 years ago. One night she was here laughing with friends, and then she was gone. Just like that. No one knew what happened. My breath caught in my throat. The whispers seemed to grow more insistent, wrapping around me like a fog. What do you mean, gone? Did they find her? No, the barista said, shaking her head. They searched everywhere, but it was as if she vanished into thin air. Some say she's still here, trapped between this world and the next. A shiver ran down my spine as I processed her words. Is that why people say this place is haunted? Exactly, she replied. Most people just think it's a ghost story, but there are those who believe Emily's spirit lingers here, looking for closure or perhaps help. The cafe suddenly felt even more suffocating. I was no longer just a visitor. I was an unwitting participant in a narrative that was still being written. What happened that night? I asked, trying to piece together the fragments of Emily's story. I don't know all the details, the barista admitted. But there were rumors. Some said she had a fight with her boyfriend. Others claimed they saw her leave with a stranger. The police investigated, but no leads came up. Did anyone ever see her after that? I pressed, feeling an inexplicable connection to this lost soul. Well, she shook her head. No one. It's like she just disappeared into the night. Since then, strange things have happened in the cafe. Lights flicker, chairs move, and sometimes people say they hear her voice. I felt a sense of urgency wash over me. What if she's trying to tell us something? What if she needs help? The barista's eyes widened. Be careful. Sometimes it's better not to dig too deep. The past can be dangerous, but I couldn't let it go. I needed to know the truth. The photograph felt warm in my hands, a link to a life cut short. What do you suggest I do? I asked, my voice steady despite the rising anxiety within me. Maybe talk to some of the regulars, she replied. They might know more about what happened. Just be careful. Not everyone wants to revisit that night. I nodded, determination coursing through me. I would uncover the mystery of Emily's disappearance, even if it meant confronting the unknown. As the barista walked away, I returned my gaze to the photograph. The cafe around me faded back into the background as I stared into Emily's eyes, searching for answers. After a moment, I decided to approach a group of patrons huddled at a nearby table. They looked to be in their 30s, animatedly discussing something that made them laugh, but when they noticed my approach, their smiles faded slightly. Excuse me, I said, my heart racing. I'm new in town and just heard about Emily. I found her photo, and I was hoping you could tell me more about her. One of the men, tall with a scruffy beard, exchanged glances with the others. Emily, that's a sensitive topic. I know it's uncomfortable, I continued, trying to keep my voice steady. But I feel like she's still here, and I want to understand what happened. The man sighed, looking around the table. It's been years, but I suppose it's okay to talk about it. He leaned forward, lowering his voice as if the walls could listen. Emily was a bright light in this place. She was always smiling, always laughing. But she was going through some stuff. Her boyfriend was, well, let's just say he wasn't the best guy. There were rumors of jealousy, arguments. Did they fight that night? I asked, feeling a knot form in my stomach. Yeah, another woman chimed in, her expression somber. They had a huge argument. I remember seeing them leave together, but they seemed fine, just heated. Then Emily was gone. The group shared uneasy glances. We tried to tell the police everything we knew, the man continued. But it felt like nothing ever came of it. Just silence. Have you ever seen anything strange since then? I pressed, hoping for a clue, a sign that would lead me to the truth. The woman shrugged. Sometimes the lights flicker or you feel a chill. It's hard to say if it's really her or just our imagination. But you can sense her presence, especially when it's quiet. I felt a sense of solidarity with these people, all bound by the same haunting memory. Do you think she's looking for something? The man nodded slowly. Closure, maybe. Or just a way to let go. As their words settled over me, I realized that I was more than a curious bystander. I was now part of a story that demanded to be told. The whispers echoed in my mind, urging me to delve deeper into the enigma that was Emily. I had to find out what really happened that night for both her and myself. With renewed determination, I left the group and made my way back to my table, the photograph still clutched tightly in my hand. I knew I would return to the cafe, drawn into its mysteries. Emily's story was not over. It was waiting for someone brave enough to uncover the truth. That night, the cafe transformed into a sanctuary of shadows and secrets. I found myself unable to shake off the stories I had heard. The air felt electric with tension, and the soft glow of the overhead lights flickered intermittently, casting elongated shadows across the walls. Each flicker seemed to pulse with an urgency that made my heart race. I returned home with the photograph tucked safely in my pocket, but sleep eluded me. The whispers continued, weaving through my thoughts like a spectral thread, urging me to investigate further. I felt a strange kinship with Emily, as if her unfinished story had entwined with my own. The next day I decided to return to the cafe, armed with more questions. As I stepped inside, the familiar scent of roasted coffee and baked pastries greeted me, but an underlying tension crackled in the air. It was a quiet morning. Only a few patrons occupied the tables, their conversations hushed. I could sense an unspoken weight in the room, a collective awareness of the past that lingered like a ghost. I approached the barista again, hoping she could provide more insight. I need to know more about Emily's life. What was she like before she disappeared? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The barista paused, her eyes clouding with memories. Emily was vibrant, full of life. She had this contagious laugh that could light up the room. But she was also deeply troubled. Her relationship with her boyfriend was complicated. He was possessive, and there were times when she seemed afraid of him. I felt a knot form in my stomach. Did anyone ever confront him about it? Some tried, she replied, her tone heavy with resignation. But he had a way of charming people. He could be sweet and charming one moment and then turn cold the next. After she disappeared, he became even more withdrawn. People stopped coming to the cafe and rumors started swirling. Some even said he knew more than he let on. As I absorbed her words, a sense of foreboding washed over me. I needed to find him if he was still around. Do you know where I might find him? I asked, determination solidifying in my voice. The barista shook her head. I heard he moved away after the investigation. But some say he returns occasionally, usually when the nights are darkest. The thought sent chills down my spine. I felt compelled to find him, to confront whatever truth lay hidden beneath the surface. But first, I needed to gather more information. I decided to speak with the patrons again, hoping they could share more fragments of Emily's story. I approached a middle-aged man sitting alone at a corner table, nursing a cup of coffee. He looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes. "You're back," he said, a mix of curiosity and caution in his tone. "I am," I replied, taking a seat across from him. "I want to know more about Emily. Anything you can tell me would help." He hesitated, glancing around the cafe as if he expected someone to overhear. "Emily was special," he began slowly. "She had this way of making you feel seen, you know. But she also had her demons. Her boyfriend was one of them." "What do you mean?" I pressed. "Let's just say he had a reputation," he said, lowering his voice. "There were whispers about him, things he did to her when no one was looking. It wasn't just jealousy, it was darker. I saw them fight one night, and the look in her eyes, it was haunting. Like she was trapped." "Did anyone try to help her?" I asked, feeling a mix of anger and frustration. He sighed deeply, a pained expression crossing his face. "We tried. A few of us reached out, but she always brushed us off. Said she could handle it. It's easy to blame her for staying, but when you're in that situation, you can't see the way out." His words resonated within me. I couldn't help but think of my own struggles, the moments when I felt trapped by my circumstances. "Do you think she's still here?" "In the cafe?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. He nodded, a shadow crossing his features. "Some nights when it's quiet, I can feel her presence. Like she's trying to reach out to tell us something. But it's never clear." As I listened, I felt a strange pull to the cafe, a magnetic force that beckoned me closer to the truth. "What if she's trying to warn us?" I said, a sudden realization hitting me. "What if her disappearance was more than just a tragedy?" The man's gaze intensified. "That's the question, isn't it? If she's still here, it's because she has something to say. But you need to be careful. The more you dig, the deeper the shadows become." I nodded, feeling a surge of determination. I would uncover Emily's story, no matter the cost. As I left the cafe, the sunlight felt dimmer, and the shadows seemed to stretch further across the pavement. The weight of the past hung heavy in the air, urging me onward. That evening, I decided to visit the place where Emily had last been seen. I had learned that there was a park nearby, a small, secluded area known for its quiet trails. I hoped that by walking through the park, I might stumble upon something, anything, that could shed light on her fate. As I made my way through the winding paths, the trees loomed overhead, their branches weaving together like fingers interlocking in prayer. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and the distant rustle of leaves. It felt both peaceful and foreboding, as if the park itself was a guardian of secrets. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows that danced across the ground. As twilight descended, the atmosphere shifted. The sounds of the day faded, replaced by an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of small creatures in the underbrush. I felt an inexplicable tension in the air, as if something was watching me from the darkness. I paused near a bench, taking a deep breath as I scanned the area. My heart raced as I recalled the stories of Emily. The whispers seemed to echo in my mind, urging me to pay attention. I stepped closer to the edge of the path, feeling drawn to a thicket of trees that loomed ahead. Suddenly I heard a faint sound, a soft sob, barely audible but unmistakable. My pulse quickened and I strained to listen. It was a haunting sound, a mixture of sorrow and desperation. I stepped forward, cautiously parting the branches to peer into the darkness beyond. "Emily," I called softly, my voice trembling with uncertainty. "Is that you?" For a moment, silence enveloped me, thick and suffocating. Then I felt a rush of cold air sweep past me, sending a shiver down my spine. The sobbing grew louder, more urgent, as if someone was pleading for help. I pushed through the thicket, heart pounding, and my breath caught in my throat as I stumbled into a small clearing. There, beneath the canopy of trees, stood a figure cloaked in shadows. The air felt electric, charged with an energy that made my skin prickle. "Who's there?" I called, my voice barely a whisper, fear clawing at my insides. The figure turned slowly, and I felt a jolt of recognition. It was her, the woman from the photograph, Emily. Her face was blurred, shrouded in darkness, but the essence of her was unmistakable. She looked lost and heartbroken, her eyes reflecting a deep sadness that pierced through me. "Help me," she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath, echoing through the trees like a ghostly refrain. Before I could respond, the shadows shifted, and with a flicker of light, she was gone. The clearing was empty, and the sobs faded into the night, leaving only an oppressive silence in their wake. I stood frozen, grappling with the reality of what I had just witnessed. Emily was real. She was here, trapped between worlds, and she needed me to uncover the truth. I knew then that my investigation was only beginning, and the shadows would guide me toward answers I had yet to discover. As I turned to leave the park, my heart raced with both fear and determination. The journey ahead would be fraught with peril, but I could not turn back now. Emily's story demanded to be told, and I would be the one to unravel its haunting mystery. I stumbled out of the park, my heart racing, still reeling from the vision of Emily. The chill of the evening air nipped at my skin, but the adrenaline coursing through me kept me warm. My mind whirled with questions. What had just happened? Was it truly her spirit, or merely a trick of my imagination? I needed answers, and I knew I had to confront the past to uncover the truth. The following day, I decided to dig deeper into Emily's life, to learn more about the people who surrounded her. My first stop was the local library, a dusty haven filled with old newspapers and records. The librarian, an elderly woman with sharp eyes and a knowing smile, seemed to sense my urgency. "What can I help you with?" she asked, her voice low but curious. "I'm looking for information about Emily, the girl who disappeared a few years ago," I replied, my throat dry. "Anything you have would help." Her expression shifted, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. "Emily, a tragic case. Her story is still talked about in whispers around here." She gestured toward a collection of newspaper clippings, neatly bound together. "I'll start with these. As I sifted through the brittle pages, the details of Emily's life began to emerge. There were articles about her disappearance, filled with grief-stricken quotes from her friends and family. The headlines screamed of mystery, but the deeper I delved, the more I discovered about her turbulent relationships. One article mentioned her boyfriend's name, Michael, a name that sent a shiver down my spine. He had been the last person seen with her before she vanished. The more I read, the more the pieces of Emily's life began to fit together like a haunting puzzle. She had dreams of becoming an artist, a passionate soul trapped in a toxic relationship. Michael's presence loomed large, shrouded in darkness and possessiveness. Do you think she was trying to escape him? I wondered aloud, more to myself than to the librarian. I believe she was, she replied, her eyes narrowing with empathy. But sometimes the past clings to us, especially when we're haunted by our own choices. It's a weight that's hard to shake off. The librarian's words resonated with me. Emily's life had been filled with moments of joy, but also with pain and conflict. I couldn't help but feel a deep sorrow for her, for the dreams that had been extinguished too soon. As I continued to read, I discovered a name I hadn't expected, Sarah, Emily's close friend. The articles mentioned how Sarah had tried to support Emily during her struggles with Michael. I need to find her, I thought, a sense of urgency pushing me forward. If anyone could provide clarity about Emily's life, it would be her. After some searching, I managed to track down Sarah's address. It was a small apartment not far from the cafe, nestled in a quiet neighborhood that felt worlds away from the turmoil I was uncovering. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. When I arrived, the door was answered by a young woman with tired eyes and an air of melancholy. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. "I'm looking for Sarah," I replied, my heart pounding. "I want to talk to her about Emily." A flicker of recognition passed across her face, and she stepped back slightly. "I'm Sarah," she said, her voice softening. "What do you want to know?" "Please, I just want to understand what happened," I said, my voice earnest. Emily's story, it's haunted me ever since I first heard it. I need to know more about her life, especially about Michael. Sarah hesitated, a shadow crossing her features. "Michael," she murmured, a mix of anger and sadness in her tone. "He was charming at first, but he changed. He became possessive, and it terrified her. I tried to help, but she was so in love, it blinded her." "Did you ever think he might have hurt her?" I pressed gently. Her expression darkened. "I feared it. After Emily disappeared, Michael acted like nothing had happened. He seemed unbothered, almost relieved. I confronted him once, and it was like talking to a wall. He wouldn't admit anything." I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. "Did you ever report him? Did anyone believe you?" "I tried," she whispered, her voice breaking. "But people loved him. He was charismatic, always knew the right things to say. When Emily was gone, they thought she just ran away. But I knew she wouldn't leave us like that. She wouldn't abandon her dreams." As Sarah spoke, I could see the pain etched on her face, a reflection of the guilt she carried. "I'm so sorry," I said, my heart aching for her. "But if there's anything you remember, any detail." "I have something," she interrupted, her voice suddenly firm. Emily had mentioned a place she wanted to go, a little cove by the beach. She wanted to paint there to escape from everything. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now I wonder if she was planning to leave him. "Where is it?" I asked, my pulse quickening. "It's not far from here, just a short drive," Sarah replied, her eyes filled with both hope and dread. "You should go there. It might hold the answers you're looking for." With renewed determination, I thanked her and made my way to my car. The cove could be the key to unlocking Emily's past, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was calling me. As I drove, the landscape shifted, the cityscape giving way to sprawling greenery and the salty scent of the ocean. The road wound tightly, hugging the cliffs as I approached the cove. I could hear the waves crashing against the rocks, a soothing yet haunting melody that filled the air. Parking my car, I stepped out and felt the cool ocean breeze against my skin. It was beautiful here, a stark contrast to the turmoil I had been investigating. As I walked toward the shore, I noticed a weathered path that led down to the beach. Each step felt heavy with expectation, the sound of the waves drowning out my thoughts. The cove opened up before me, revealing a stretch of sand bordered by towering cliffs. It felt secluded, a hidden gem where secrets could easily be buried. I began to explore, my heart pounding in rhythm with the crashing waves. I scanned the area for anything that might connect to Emily, perhaps remnants of her presence or clues left behind. As I wandered, I stumbled upon a small rock formation, its surface smoothed by the relentless ocean. Suddenly I felt a chill sweep through the air, causing me to pause. There, half buried in the sand, was a small sketchbook, its pages weathered and frayed. My heart raced as I bent down to pick it up, the sight of it sending a wave of emotions crashing over me. I opened the sketchbook carefully, and my breath caught in my throat. The pages were filled with drawings, landscapes, portraits, and most hauntingly, self-portraits of Emily. Each one radiated her spirit, capturing her essence with stunning detail. But there was more, a series of sketches depicting a dark figure lurking in the background, its presence casting a shadow over her art. My hands trembled as I turned the pages, uncovering a glimpse into her mind. It was as if she had been documenting her fears, the darkness that had seeped into her life. The final sketch was chilling, a drawing of the cove, with a storm brewing in the background, waves crashing violently against the rocks. Beneath it, she had written a single word: help. Tears filled my eyes as I realized the weight of her message. Emily had felt trapped, surrounded by a darkness she couldn't escape. And here in this hidden cove she had sought solace, only to be met with her fears. I closed the sketchbook gently, my heart heavy with sorrow. Emily's story was unfolding, layer by layer, and I knew I had to bring her truth to light. But I also felt the weight of the danger lurking behind me, as if the shadows were beginning to close in. With newfound resolve, I stood up, ready to face whatever awaited me. Emily needed me to uncover the truth, to free her from the darkness that had claimed her. But as I turned to leave, the wind shifted, and I felt a presence at my back, a sensation that I was no longer alone. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling as the shadows around me deepened. The sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting long, menacing silhouettes against the cliffs. My heart raced as I braced myself, ready to confront the unknown. The chill of the air wrapped around me, prickling my skin as I spun around to face the presence that lingered behind me. The cove, once a serene escape, now felt like a trap, its beauty tainted by an unseen threat. I squinted against the fading light, scanning the cliffs and the sandy expanse for any sign of movement. "Who's there?" I repeated, my voice more assertive this time, although my heart hammered in my chest like a frantic drum. The sound of waves crashing against the rocks filled the silence, but there was no response. I took a hesitant step back, the sketchbook clutched tightly to my chest. The sun dipped lower, casting elongated shadows that danced across the beach. It was as if the very ground beneath my feet was shifting, hiding secrets that were meant to remain buried. Just then I caught a glimpse of movement, a figure darting along the cliff's edge, barely visible against the rocky background. My breath caught in my throat. Was it a trick of the light? Or was someone really up there? I felt a pull, an insatiable need to investigate further, but a sense of dread gnawed at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The echo of Sarah's words replayed in my mind. Emily had mentioned a place she wanted to go. I had found the cove, but perhaps I wasn't alone in seeking answers. With my heart racing, I began to move cautiously toward the base of the cliffs, the soft sand giving way beneath my feet. The area was littered with seaweed and driftwood, remnants of the tide's recent passage. As I approached the rock face, I noticed a small path winding upward, partially obscured by overgrown brush. Should I really go up there? I muttered to myself, glancing back at the cove. The waves crashed louder, as if urging me to turn back. But the allure of discovery was too strong. I had come this far, and I couldn't back down now. Taking a deep breath, I started up the narrow path, my fingers brushing against the cool, damp stones for balance. Each step felt heavier, as if the weight of Emily's story was bearing down on me. The sun was nearly gone, and the world around me shifted into shades of deep blue and gray, shadows growing long and menacing. As I climbed higher, I could feel the tension in the air. The wind howled, rustling the leaves and creating an eerie symphony of sound. It was then that I heard it, a faint whisper carried by the wind. "Help me," the voice was soft, almost indistinguishable from the sound of the waves. My heart leapt into my throat. "Emily," I called out, my voice echoing against the stone. "Is that you?" The whisper faded, leaving me in an unsettling silence. I hesitated, uncertainty flooding my mind. Had I truly heard her? Or was my mind playing tricks on me? I pressed on, reaching the top of the cliff, where the path opened up to a rocky ledge overlooking the cove. I stood there breathless, the view both beautiful and haunting. Below, the waves crashed violently against the shore, the water churning with an angry intensity. The wind whipped around me, carrying the salty scent of the ocean mixed with something else, something rotten and decayed. My gaze fell to the other side of the ledge, where the rock face jutted out sharply. There, partially hidden by weeds, was a small alcove. I felt an inexplicable urge to investigate. As I approached, the whispers returned, clearer this time, tugging at my very soul. "Help me." I knelt down, clearing away the debris that concealed the entrance. The space opened up into a dark cavity, the shadows shifting like living beings. Fear prickled at my senses, but I couldn't turn back now. I needed to know what lay within. I reached for my phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the alcove's interior. To my shock, I found remnants of what looked like a makeshift campsite. A tattered blanket lay crumpled on the ground, and scattered around were crumpled pieces of paper, each marked with sketches that looked disturbingly familiar. Emily, I breathed, recognizing her distinct artistic style. I reached for one of the papers, the beam of light revealing sketches of the cove and the dark figure from her previous drawings. But as I continued to scan the area, I noticed something else, something that made my blood run cold. At the back of the alcove, partially hidden by rocks, was a small, weathered box. My hands trembled as I reached for it, feeling a mix of anticipation and dread. I opened the box slowly, the hinges creaking in protest. Inside, I found a collection of items, a locket, a brush, and a small notebook, all of which seemed deeply personal. I picked up the locket, opening it to reveal a faded photograph of Emily and Michael, their faces frozen in a moment of blissful joy. But beneath that image lay another, Emily, her eyes filled with fear, standing next to the dark figure that haunted her sketches. A shiver coursed through me as I realized the truth. The figure wasn't just a figment of her imagination. It was a representation of the very real danger she faced. My thoughts raced. What had Michael done? Was he here lurking in the shadows? The air around me felt thick with tension, as if the very walls were closing in. I needed to leave this place fast. As I began to back away, the whispers intensified, merging into a cacophony of voices pleading for help. Help me. You have to help me. Panicking, I turned to flee, but as I reached the entrance of the alcove, I froze. Standing in the shadows, partially obscured by the rock face, was a figure, a man with dark hair and an unsettling smile. It was Michael. Looking for something, he asked, his voice dripping with false sweetness. My stomach dropped, a visceral sense of dread crashing over me like the waves below. What do you want? I managed to stammer, my heart pounding in my chest. He stepped forward, the light catching the glint of something sharp in his hand. You shouldn't have come here. You're too late to help her. I took a step back, my mind racing. This was the moment I had dreaded, the confrontation I had been unprepared for. Emily needs help. You have to let her go. He chuckled softly, a chilling sound that echoed in the alcove. Oh, but she's already mine. She was always mine. The weight of his words hit me like a punch to the gut. I turned to run, adrenaline coursing through me, but before I could escape, he lunged forward, grabbing my arm with a grip that felt like iron. In that moment, everything I had uncovered flashed before my eyes, the drawings, the whispers, the love and pain that had surrounded Emily's life. I knew I had to fight back to escape the darkness that threatened to consume me. Summoning every ounce of strength, I twisted my arm free and sprinted toward the entrance, the sound of his footsteps pounding behind me. As I burst into the open air, I could feel the weight of the shadows behind me. The cove, once a refuge, had turned into a nightmare. I raced down the rocky path, my heart racing with each step. The whispers became a chorus, urging me to keep going, to find the light. I didn't stop until I reached my car, fumbling with my keys as panic surged through me. The sound of the waves crashing echoed in my ears, a reminder of the darkness that lurked just behind me. I could feel Michael's presence closing in, and I needed to escape, needed to find a way to free Emily from his grasp. With a shaky breath, I finally managed to start the engine. The the roar of the car drowning out the whispers as I sped away from the cove, leaving behind the darkness that threatened to swallow me whole. But even as I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The truth was still out there, waiting to be uncovered, and I wouldn't rest until Emily was free. Have you ever felt like you were being watched? The question hung in the air like a dense fog, an unsettling thought that seeped into my mind. It was the kind of feeling that crept up on you when you least expected it, a nagging suspicion that left you glancing over your shoulder. My name is Evan, and I live in a small, unremarkable town where nothing ever happens, or so I thought. The streets were familiar, lined with houses that bore the weight of years, each one a story untold. My days were predictable, filled with work and mundane routines. But lately, a sense of unease had begun to gnaw at me. It all started with strange noises. At first, I brushed them off as figments of my imagination, perhaps the old pipes in my apartment or the wind rattling the windows. But then one evening, as I returned home from work, I heard it again. A soft tapping, rhythmic and persistent, like someone lightly drumming their fingers against my wall. I paused, heart racing, straining to listen. It felt too deliberate, too intentional. I shook my head, convincing myself it was nothing. Yet that night, sleep eluded me. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the sound echoing in my mind. Each tap sent a shiver down my spine. I focused on the clock, counting the seconds, but the noise seemed to multiply, transforming into a whisper, a voice that was just out of reach. 11. I sat up, my heart pounding. I glanced around my dimly lit room, the shadows stretching along the walls like dark tendrils. The air felt thick, almost suffocating. Was someone in my apartment? I turned on the bedside lamp, flooding the room with light, but the corners remained shrouded in darkness. The next morning, I forced myself to shake off the lingering fear. I headed to work, a small bookstore nestled on the corner of Maple Street. It was a haven of comfort, filled with the scent of aged paper and the sound of quiet pages turning. But even there, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Customers lingered a moment too long, their eyes following me as I moved about the store. "Everything okay, Evan?" my coworker Lisa asked, concern etched on her face. "Yeah, just a little tired," I replied, forcing a smile. But I could feel the weight of their stares, the suspicion brewing beneath the surface. As the days passed, my unease grew. The tapping continued, accompanied by fleeting shadows that danced just beyond my vision. I began to question my sanity, wondering if I was truly losing my grip. The familiar streets transformed into a labyrinth of uncertainty, each turn shrouded in an unsettling silence. One evening, I decided to take a walk to clear my mind. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that stretched across the pavement. As I walked, I noticed something unusual, a faint scent in the air, something acrid and metallic like rust. It curled around me, thickening with every step. I paused, trying to pinpoint its source, but the streets were empty, the houses standing silent and still. Then I heard it again, the tapping. It was louder now, reverberating through the stillness. My heart raced as I turned, scanning the darkening street. I quickened my pace, the shadows seeming to stretch toward me, eager to pull me into their embrace. As I neared my apartment, a chill crept up my spine. I could feel it, a presence lurking just beyond the edge of my vision. I fumbled for my keys, heart pounding, desperate to escape into the safety of my home. But the door swung open before I could touch the handle. A figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim light of my apartment. I stumbled back, fear flooding my senses. "Who are you?" I croaked, trying to keep my voice steady. But the figure remained silent, unmoving. In that moment, everything changed. The air thickened, the darkness coiling around me like a living thing, and I realized with horror that this was only the beginning. The atmosphere felt charged, electric, with an unseen threat. I turned to run, but my feet felt rooted to the ground, my body screaming for escape. Then, just as suddenly, the figure stepped into the light, and I froze. It was a woman, her features obscured by shadows. Her eyes glinted with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "You felt it too, haven't you?" she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. "Felt what?" I managed, dread pooling in my stomach. "The dark front. Well, it's here. It's always been here." I took a step back, but she reached out, her hand brushing against my arm. The touch sent a jolt through me, and for a brief moment I felt the weight of her fear. The darkness swirled around us, whispering secrets I couldn't comprehend. "I've seen it," she continued, her voice trembling. "It's watching us. You have to listen to me. You have to understand." I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat. The shadows seemed to deepen, curling around us like smoke. I wanted to flee, to escape this nightmare, but something in her gaze held me captive. "Help me," she pleaded, her eyes wide with desperation. "Before it's too late." In that moment, I knew I had to make a choice. I could turn away, ignore the warning, and retreat into my safe, mundane existence. Or I could step into the unknown, confront the darkness that had invaded my life, and uncover the truth that lay hidden beneath the surface. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her gaze, the darkness pressing in around us. "Okay," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Tell me everything." As the words left my mouth, I felt the shadows shift, swirling around us with renewed intensity. I was about to cross a threshold, stepping into a world I never knew existed. The dark front was here, and there would be no turning back. The woman's grip tightened around my arm, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and urgency. I could feel my heart racing, the pulse thundering in my ears as I tried to process what was happening. Her presence was electric, charged with an emotion I couldn't quite place. Was it fear, desperation, or something darker? "Come inside," she urged, glancing nervously down the hallway as if expecting something to leap out from the shadows. I hesitated for a split second, but the look in her eyes was enough to push me forward. I stepped into my apartment, the familiar space suddenly feeling foreign and threatening. The door clicked shut behind us, sealing away the night. The light flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows across the walls. "What do you know?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady as I moved deeper into the room. "What's going on?" She turned to face me, her expression grave. "My name is Clara. I've been following the signs, watching as the darkness spreads." She took a breath, her hands trembling slightly. "It's not just in your head, Evan. It's real. Something has awakened in this town, and it's feeding on our fears." "Feeding on our fears," I echoed, incredulous. The words felt absurd, yet the weight of her tone made it impossible to dismiss. What do you mean? Clara stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. People have been disappearing. It starts small, unusual sounds, shadows that flicker out of sight. Then one by one they vanish as if they've never existed. I've seen it happen. I thought I was going mad, but then I realized this darkness is alive. It's a force and it's targeting us. My stomach churned as her words sank in. But why us? What does it want? I don't know, she admitted, her eyes reflecting a mix of fear and determination. But I believe it feeds on isolation and despair. The more we feel alone, the stronger it becomes. I've been trying to warn others, but they don't believe me. They think I'm just paranoid. I took a step back, trying to digest her claims. The unsettling noises, the shadows that seemed to shift at the edge of my vision, it all started to make a twisted kind of sense. The fear I had felt was real. It had been creeping up on me, tightening its grip. What do? We have to confront it, Clara said, her voice steadying. We can't let it isolate us any longer. There's a place, an old building on the outskirts of town. It's said to be where the darkness gathers. If we go there, we might find answers. Answers, I repeated, doubt flickering in my mind. The idea of walking into the lion's den filled me with dread. But what choice did I have? The shadows were already closing in around me. Yes, she insisted, her eyes burning with intensity. If we confront it, we can break its hold on this town. But we have to do it together. All right, I agreed reluctantly, my resolve hardening. Let's go. We moved quickly, slipping out of my apartment and into the cool night air. The streets were eerily quiet, the usual hum of the town replaced by an unsettling stillness. I glanced at Clara, who walked beside me, her gaze scanning the shadows. What if it sees us? I asked, unease creeping into my voice. It already knows we're here, she replied, her tone firm. But we can't show fear. Stay focused. The path to the old building felt longer than it should have, the darkness pressing in from all sides. I felt the weight of the night like a heavy cloak, the air thick with a tension I couldn't shake. The streetlights flickered, their glow struggling to pierce the blackness that surrounded us. As we approached the outskirts of town, I could see the outline of the abandoned structure looming in the distance. It was an old factory, its windows shattered and walls crumbling, a place that once bustled with life now reduced to a hollow shell. We're close, Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Oh, this is it. I swallowed hard, dread pooling in my stomach. The factory seemed to breathe, the shadows swirling around it like a living entity. I hesitated at the entrance, the heavy door creaking ominously as Clara pushed it open. Inside, the air was stale and thick with dust. A sense of foreboding enveloped us as we stepped into the cavernous space. Moonlight streamed through the broken windows, illuminating the scattered debris that littered the floor. Stay close, Clara instructed, her voice steady despite the palpable tension in the air. We need to find the source. We moved deeper into the factory, the sounds of our footsteps echoing eerily off the walls. The shadows seemed to shift and twist, playing tricks on my mind. Each time I glanced back, I half expected to see something lurking just out of sight. Do you feel that? Clara suddenly asked, pausing in her tracks. I nodded, my skin prickling with awareness. It was a heavy presence, an oppressive weight that settled over us. It's here, I whispered, fear wrapping around me like a vice. We have to keep going, she urged, moving forward with determination. We're getting closer. We ventured further into the factory, the air growing colder, the shadows darker. I could feel the energy shift, a thickening of the atmosphere that made it difficult to breathe. The walls felt alive, vibrating with an unseen force. Then in the distance I caught a glimpse of something, a flicker of movement. My heart raced as I squinted into the darkness. Did you see that? I asked, panic rising in my throat. Clara nodded, her expression tense. We need to hurry. As we pushed on, the shadows seemed to close in around us, whispering in a language I couldn't understand. My mind raced with 100 thoughts, fear clawing at my insides. What if we were too late? What if we walked straight into the darkness? Suddenly a loud crash echoed through the factory, and I jumped, adrenaline surging through my veins. What was that? I gasped, looking around frantically. I don't know, Clara replied, her eyes wide. But we can't stop now. We pressed on, moving toward the sound, the anticipation building with each step. I felt the shadows wrapping around me, almost as if they were trying to pull me back, to isolate me from Clara. Stay close, I shouted, forcing myself to keep pace. Then we turned a corner, and there it was. A large chamber filled with debris, a dim light flickering in the center. The source of the light pulsed rhythmically, casting strange shadows that danced along the walls. My heart raced as I stepped closer, the air thick with tension. Is that, Clara began, her voice trailing off in disbelief. Yes, I whispered, the reality of the situation crashing down on me. Well, that's it. That's the sword. The light flickered again, and suddenly the shadows coalesced, forming shapes that loomed large and menacing. They twisted and writhed as if alive, reaching out with tendrils of darkness that threatened to envelop us. Run, Clara shouted, but it was too late. The darkness surged forward, wrapping around us like a suffocating blanket. I felt a cold grip on my heart, a fear so intense it threatened to swallow me whole. Evan, Clara's voice cut through the chaos, snapping me back to reality. We have to fight it. I nodded, my mind racing. I couldn't let it take us, I couldn't let it win. I gathered all my strength, pushing against the fear that threatened to overwhelm me. Together, I shouted, and we lunged toward the pulsating light, determined to confront the darkness head-on. The shadows surged around us, but I focused on Clara, our shared resolve igniting a spark of courage. We charged forward, ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that we had to fight against the darkness that sought to consume us. In that moment, I understood we were not alone. We were stronger together. The shadows writhed around us, a chaotic mass of darkness that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. As Clara and I pushed forward, the flickering light at the center of the chamber drew us in, a beacon of hope amidst the encroaching gloom. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing the rising tension in the air. What do we do? I shouted over the cacophony of whispers that filled the space, a dissonant chorus that clawed at my sanity. We have to disrupt it, Clara yelled back, determination etched on her face. That light is the key. It's connected to the darkness, and if we can break that connection. Before she could finish, a shadow lunged at us, its form indistinct and amorphous, a manifestation of our deepest fears. I felt a cold wind rush past, and instinctively I reached out to grab Clara's arm, pulling her closer. "Stick together," I shouted, adrenaline surging through me. With renewed determination, we forged ahead. The shadows curled around us, brushing against our skin like icy fingers, but we refused to be paralyzed by fear. Each step brought us closer to the pulsating light, which flickered with an almost sentient awareness, illuminating the jagged debris scattered across the floor. As we neared the source, I could make out strange symbols etched into the ground, glowing faintly beneath the layers of dust and grime. They twisted and turned in intricate patterns, a language lost to time. "What are those?" I asked, my curiosity piquing even amidst the chaos. "I think they're some kind of sigil," Clara replied, her eyes wide with realization. "They're binding the darkness, keeping it contained. If we can break the sigil, we might waken it." A loud crash reverberated through the chamber, causing me to flinch. I turned to see a wall of darkness rising up, towering over us like an angry wave. "Hurry," I urged, my voice cracking with urgency. We reached the center, the light illuminating our faces as we knelt beside the glowing symbols. Clara inspected them closely, her brow furrowed in concentration. "We need something to disrupt the energy," she said, glancing around the room. I scanned the area, heart racing. Then I spotted a rusted metal pipe, half buried under debris. "That might work," I yelled, scrambling to retrieve it. The pipe was heavy in my hands, cold and rough against my skin, but it felt like a lifeline. "Bring it here," Clara urged, her voice steady despite the chaos. I dashed back to her side, holding the pipe aloft. "What do we do?" "Strike the sigil," she commanded, her eyes intense with focus. "Aim for the center." Taking a deep breath, I raised the pipe and brought it down with all my strength onto the glowing symbol. A blinding flash erupted, and the chamber trembled as the sigil shattered like glass. Energy crackled in the air, sending shockwaves through the darkness that surrounded us. The shadows writhed and shrieked, their forms distorting in agony as the light surged brighter. Clara and I shielded our eyes, the brilliance nearly overwhelming. Then with a final explosive pulse, the darkness recoiled, retreating from the light as if burned. "Keep going," Clara urged, her voice fierce. "We have to break more of them." We moved frantically from symbol to symbol, each strike against the sigils resonating with a deep, satisfying thrum. With each one we shattered, the darkness seemed to diminish, losing its hold on the chamber. I could feel the weight of the fear slowly lifting, replaced by a sense of empowerment. But as we worked, the shadows retaliated, becoming more aggressive. They lashed out, forming grotesque shapes that lunged for us, their intent palpable. "Watch out," I shouted, ducking just as a tendril shot past my head, narrowly missing me. "Focus," Clara cried, her eyes fierce with determination. "We can't let it distract us." I gritted my teeth, pushing past the fear. We continued our frantic assault on the sigils, each strike fueled by adrenaline. But as the last sigil crumbled under the weight of the pipe, a deep rumble echoed through the chamber, shaking the very ground beneath us. "What's happening?" I gasped, panic surging within me as the walls began to crack, splintering under the pressure of the unleashed darkness. It's collapsing, Clara yelled, her voice laced with urgency. We have to get out. Without hesitation, we turned and sprinted back toward the entrance, the shadows swirling violently behind us, their whispers now a cacophony of rage. The factory groaned, debris falling around us as we raced through the disintegrating structure. My heart pounded as I pushed through the door and into the night air, the coolness hitting me like a wave. I glanced back just in time to see the factory implode, shadows swirling in a chaotic frenzy before being swallowed by the collapsing walls. We staggered away from the sight, breathless, the night wrapping around us like a comforting blanket. Clara and I exchanged glances, the adrenaline still coursing through our veins. Did we do it? I asked, uncertainty lacing my voice. I think so, she replied, her face pale but resolute. But the darkness isn't gone. It's just waiting for another chance. I took a deep breath, the weight of her words settling heavily on my chest. What do we do now? We need to warn the others, Clara said, determination burning in her eyes. We can't let them fall prey to the darkness like those before us. We have to gather people, create a network, and find a way to combat it together. I nodded, resolve building within me. Together. As we walked through the quiet streets, the moonlight casting an ethereal glow, I felt a flicker of hope. We had faced the darkness and survived, but the battle was far from over. The night still held its secrets, and I knew we would need every ounce of strength to confront the darkness that threatened to envelop our lives once more. The shadows were always there, lurking just beyond our perception. But we wouldn't face them alone. I glanced at Clara, her determined expression giving me courage. Together we would fight. Together we would stand against the dark front that loomed over us, refusing to back down. The streets felt different as we made our way back through the town, the familiar sounds muted, as if the darkness had cast a veil over the world. Each step echoed in the stillness, and I could feel the tension in Clara's posture beside me. Her determination was palpable, yet I sensed an undercurrent of fear of what lay ahead and of what we might yet face. Where do we start? I asked, breaking the silence as we reached the corner of my block. The faint glow of streetlights barely penetrated the shadows, casting elongated silhouettes that danced unsettlingly on the pavement. We need to find those who have noticed the changes, Clara replied, her gaze scanning the surroundings. People have seen things, they just don't connect the dots. We have to make them understand. Do you think they'll believe us? I felt a flicker of doubt. After all, we had barely managed to grasp the reality of what we had encountered ourselves. If we present the evidence, what we experienced at the factory, they'll have to believe us, Clara insisted, her voice steady. We can't let fear silence us. As we walked, I recalled the faces of my neighbors, their laughter, their daily routines. Now it all felt so fragile, as if it could shatter under the weight of the unseen threat lurking in the shadows. Let's head to the diner, I suggested. It's usually busy, and if anyone has noticed something strange, it'll be there. The diner was a hub of the community, a place where locals gathered to share stories and meals. As we approached, the neon sign flickered like a heartbeat, the glow casting a warm yet eerie light. Inside, the familiar smell of coffee and pancakes filled the air, mixing with the chatter of patrons. But as I glanced around, a knot of anxiety twisted in my stomach. The atmosphere felt tense, the laughter muted. People spoke in hushed tones, their eyes darting toward the windows as if they were expecting something to emerge from the darkness. We took a seat at the counter, and the waitress, a kind woman named Betty, came over, her smile wavering. "What can I get for you, too?" "Coffee, please," Clara said, her eyes scanning the room. "Have you noticed anything unusual lately?" Betty hesitated, her brow furrowing. "You could say that. A few folks have gone missing. And there's been talk of strange sounds at night, like someone's whispering, but you can't make out the words." I felt a chill creep up my spine. "Do you think it's connected to what's happening in town?" Betty glanced around cautiously before lining in closer. "I don't know, but I'm worried. It feels like something's shifting, like the darkness is creeping in on us." Clara exchanged a glance with me, a spark of determination igniting between us. "We need to spread the word," Clara said firmly. "We have to warn everyone before it's too late." Just then the door swung open and a figure stepped inside, Tom, a local journalist known for covering the town's stories. His face was pale, eyes wide with concern. "Levin, Clara, you need to say this." "What is it?" I asked, my heart racing at the urgency in his voice. "Come outside," he urged, and we followed him out into the cool night air. Tom led us to an alleyway behind the diner, the shadows stretching ominously. "I was doing some digging into the missing person cases," he began, glancing over his shoulder as if afraid someone might be listening. "And I found something strange." "What did you find?" Clara pressed, lining in. "Look at this." Tom pulled out his phone, revealing a series of photos. Each one was grainy but disturbing, a figure lurking in the shadows, eyes gleaming with an unnatural light. "These were taken near the park. I think it's connected to the disappearances." I felt a chill race down my spine as I studied the images. The figure was indistinct, shrouded in darkness, but there was something hauntingly familiar about it. "What do you think it is?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Tom admitted, shaking his head. "But I have a feeling it's not just a coincidence. The darkness is drawing people in, feeding off their fear and despair." Clara's eyes narrowed, determination returning. "We need to gather more evidence, but we can't do it alone. We need to bring others in, share our experiences." "Agreed," I said, feeling a sense of urgency swelling within me. "But we also need a plan. If we're going to confront whatever this is, we need to be prepared." Tom nodded, his brow furrowed in thought. "What if we organize a meeting? Get everyone together, share what we know, and figure out how to combat this." "That's a great idea," Clara said, her voice steady. "We need to create a network, build a community that's aware and ready to fight back." We brainstormed for a while, mapping out ideas and potential meeting spots. But as we discussed the logistics, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, curling around us as if trying to pull us back into their depths. As we parted ways, Clara and I walked side by side, the weight of the evening pressing down on us. "Do you really think we can rally people together?" I asked, uncertainty creeping back in. Clara met my gaze, her expression resolute. "We have to try, Evan. This darkness thrives on isolation. If we can unite the town, we stand a chance." We reached the corner where my apartment stood, the familiar sight now tinged with unease. "Let's start making calls," I suggested, trying to keep my voice steady. "We'll set up a meeting for tomorrow night. The sooner we act, the better." As Clara nodded, I felt a surge of hope mingled with apprehension. The battle was just beginning, and the darkness was still out there, lurking just beyond the edge of our vision. Later that night, as I lay in bed, the weight of the day hung heavy on my chest. I replayed the events over and over in my mind, the factory, the darkness, the urgency of our mission. But sleep eluded me, and as I stared at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, waiting for the right moment to strike. Outside, the wind howled, rustling the trees and sending a chill through the air. I pulled the covers tighter around me, feeling a shiver run down my spine. The darkness was relentless, and I knew it wouldn't rest until it had claimed what it wanted. But we wouldn't let that happen. Tomorrow we would gather our allies and fight back. The thought of uniting with others filled me with a sense of purpose, a flicker of defiance against the encroaching shadows. As I finally closed my eyes, I made a silent vow. We would stand together, and we would not be silenced. The darkness had met its match. The sun struggled to rise, casting a gray pallor over the town. I awoke with a sense of urgency thrumming in my veins, the events of the previous night swirling in my mind. Clara and I had made a plan, and now it was time to put it into action. I glanced at the clock. It was still early, but I knew I couldn't waste any time. I threw on a jacket and stepped out into the crisp morning air. The streets were eerily quiet, a heavy silence hanging over everything. Even the usual sounds of birds chirping seemed stifled, as if the world itself was holding its breath. My first stop was Clara's place. As I approached her apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The shadows seemed longer, more pronounced, creeping into the corners of my vision. I knocked on her door, the sound echoing unnervingly in the stillness. "Evan," Clara greeted me, her expression a mix of determination and anxiety. "I was just getting ready. Did you sleep well?" "Not really," I admitted, stepping inside. "Too much on my mind. Did you think about our meeting place?" "Yeah, I found a spot at the community center," she replied, pulling out her phone. "It's centrally located, and I can start making calls to gather people." "Great. Let's get to it," I said, trying to inject some confidence into my voice. I didn't want to show her how rattled I felt. As Clara dialed, I took a moment to scan her living room. It was cluttered with books, papers, and half-finished projects, a chaotic reflection of her mind. But it felt warm, comforting in a way. I wished we could just stay there, safe from whatever darkness loomed outside. "Okay, I've got a list of people I think will show up," Clara said, breaking the silence. "We should get some flyers made, too. We need to spread the word." "Definitely," I agreed. "The more people know, the stronger we'll be." "But what if they don't take us seriously?" Clara paused, her brow furrowing. "We can't control how they react. All we can do is share what we've experienced and let them decide for themselves." Her conviction bolstered my confidence. I nodded, but a flicker of doubt still lingered. What if no one believed us? What if we were already too late? We set to work making flyers and sending out messages to everyone we could think of. Clara's fingers danced over the keyboard, and I watched her, captivated by her determination. But as the hours passed, the nagging feeling in the back of my mind grew stronger. The shadows outside seemed to thicken, creeping closer as if waiting for us to slip. "We should probably head to the community center now," Clara suggested, glancing at the clock. "We need to be there early to set up." "Right," I said, trying to shake off the unease. "Let's go." As we stepped outside, the chill in the air bit at my skin. The streets were still deserted, but I could sense a change in the atmosphere. It felt electric, charged with an impending storm. When we arrived at the community center, I was struck by how welcoming it looked. Bright banners hanging from the ceiling, sunlight streaming through large windows. But even in the warmth of the building, a shadow of dread loomed over me. "Let's set up in the main hall," Clara suggested, leading the way. We moved chairs into a circle, creating an open space for discussion. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as we waited for people to arrive. Clara paced the room, her energy palpable, while I fiddled with the flyers, trying to keep my mind off the unease gnawing at me. Finally, the door swung open, and the first few familiar faces trickled in: Tom, Betty, and a handful of other locals. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to concern, and I felt a rush of relief wash over me. "Thanks for coming, everyone," Clara said, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "We need to talk about something serious. Something that's affecting our community." Tom nodded, taking a seat next to me. "I've been hearing rumors about people going missing and strange things happening. I want to hear what you guys know." As Clara began to share our experiences, detailing the darkness we had faced, I watched the reactions around the room. Some listened intently, eyes wide, while others exchanged skeptical glances. "Is this really happening?" one woman asked, her voice trembling. "Or is it just a coincidence?" "It's not just a coincidence," I interjected, feeling the weight of my own fear pushing me to speak. "I've felt it, this darkness, this presence. It's real, and it's getting closer." The room buzzed with murmurs, the air thick with anxiety. Clara continued, recounting the events at the factory, the whispers, and the shadows that seemed to breathe with life. Each story drew in more listeners, each voice adding weight to the growing tension. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from outside, shaking the building. Everyone froze, eyes darting to the windows. "What was that?" someone whispered, fear threading through the room. "Stay here," Clara commanded, her voice firm. "We need to check it out." I felt a surge of adrenaline as we made our way to the exit, but dread pooled in my stomach. As we stepped outside, the scene was chaotic. A group of people had gathered, staring in horror at the shattered remains of a streetlight, its glass glinting ominously on the pavement. "Did you see that?" a man shouted, his voice cracking. "It just exploded. Out of nowhere." "Something's wrong," Clara murmured, her eyes wide. "This isn't just a freak accident." As we pushed through the crowd, a heavy tension settled over us, and I could feel the weight of the darkness pressing in. It was here, lurking just beyond our perception, feeding off our fear. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of movement, something dark and fleeting darting between the shadows. My heart raced as I turned to follow it, but when I looked back, it had vanished. "Evan," Clara called, her voice snapping me back to reality. We need to focus. We can't let fear take over. We have to stand strong together. I nodded, taking a deep breath to steady myself. The darkness was closing in, but we wouldn't let it win. We would fight united against the shadows, no matter the cost. As we returned to the community center, a renewed sense of determination washed over me. The battle was far from over, but we were no longer alone. Together, we would face the dark front looming over our town. Together, we would rise against the encroaching shadows. Thank you for listening till the end. I hope you were able to relax and will now get a good rest. And don't worry, new stories are already on the way for tomorrow. So don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to stay connected. Now have a good night. See you in the next episode.